Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another Friday review. About a week ago, I received this in the mail from the bass player of the band here, Axewitch, named Bjorn Heidenborg. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Again, hope I pronounced your name correctly instead of just saying that correctly, you know. I'm just so stuck on that. Who about weeks ago had emailed me via my Gmail account requesting me to reviewing this because he remembered that back in 2021 I reviewed their comeback album Out of the Ashes Into the Fire, which I highly praise. Hell, it was also my #1 album of 2021. So those were the main reasons why he wanted to have me review this. And the thing is, in that same email, he actually gave me the option on which way I would prefer, to listen to this, which would be either digitally or physically. Well, you obviously know that what was my answer, obviously know what was my answer. And so he sent this to me. And also, I just gotta say, when I got this in the mail, I could have done a Unearthed Mail episode on this, but I just didn't do it. So honestly, I might have kind of missed a great opportunity, because of not only did he just send this to me this way, but he also went out of his way to have at least this CD signed. So I got pretty much most of the band members' signatures on the back there. So that's just real cool that I have all their signatures in a way. I guess that it is. It seems to be most of their signatures, because there's 5 signatures. There's 5 members in the band Axewitch, and 4 of them are all the original members. So it's just real great there, because Bjorn has been with them since 2012. So since I get reuniting, whatever, back during that period. So since I have it in my hands here, that this is what I'm reviewing today. It is The Last of a Dying Breed, 40 Years in Metal, which is their first album of re-recorded material, released back on March 18th, but instead of being released via the Pure Steel Records label, which was the label that released Out of the Ashes Into the Fire, instead they opt with the very relatively small label that is Hooked on Metal Records. I believe they are based out of Sweden. So, without further ado, let's begin, shall we? Now, before I get into giving my thoughts on The Last of a Dying Breed, 40 Years in Metal, you know what I have to do. I have to do a track list rundown so I can tell you folks what are the songs that are on this album, how many tracks that are on this album, and what is the time length for this album. Since this album consists a total of 10 tracks, it clocks in at the length of 39 minutes and 24 seconds. So these 10 tracks are beginning with the 1 minute and 15 second grandiose symphonic intro, that is The Arrival of the Flies Part 3. I didn't realize that there was 3 parts here. I know of the one part, which was taken from, again, their very first full-length album, The Lord of Flies, but I didn't realize that there was a Part 3. I didn't know that they recorded another part for this. Okay, whatever. Then, of course, we get into, The Lord of Flies, Axe Victim, Heavy Revolution, Death Angel, 7 Angels, Stand Up, High Power, Visions of the Past, and then, of course, Sinner. Now, it should be noted that 2 songs, of course, are taken from the very first EP, Pray for Metal, which those being Heavy Revolution and Death Angel, with 2 songs, of course, being taken from their second album, Visions of the Past. Those being Visions of the Past and Stand Up, with the majority of the 5 songs here being taken from their debut full-length album, The Lord of Flies. Again, they really almost, to an extent, kind of re-recorded the Lord of Flies album. Just again, minus 2 songs, those being Downtown and Just Another Lunatic. But besides those, technically they pretty much picked, the 5 of the best songs anyways off of those, because of Downtown and Just Another Lunatic would have just been, I don't know, filler for here. So it's kind of good that they only stopped at those 5 tracks. So there it is. There's your 10 tracks for this album. You know what that sound is. That means you know that it is time for me to read from my notes. Always have to do it a second time because I don't really give a shit about your ears, nor do I give a shit about your speakers or your TV speakers, whatever. I just don't care. Not every time does a collection of re-recorded material kicks you right on your ass, but god damn it, Axewitch gets it. I haven't been this floored by an album of re-recorded material since Oz's phenomenal Burning Leather. Though half re-recorded material and half original written material, still, the re-recorded material knocked me out with a stone-hard punch, just like this album did. It's like Axewitch remembered of what the concept of a re-recording was supposed to be instead of just being used as a cheap way to cash in on nostalgia that most bands I've noticed have done. Let alone most of them just phoning it in their performance knowing that they are going to make more money. Not here. Axewitch doesn't phone in anything. Everything comes across as genuine as possible, to the point where I even think that these versions blow away the originals. Normally I'm one to be a purist, but Axewitch have become a new exception. Of course, it should be given that Axewitch were young and didn't have as much to work with given their situations being signed to the Fingerprint label back in the day. So things were limited. But due to how great the finished results of their last album, Out of the Ashes into the Fire, came out, you knew that Axewitch would make the most of it by this time properly re-recording their favorite classics off of their early releases to make the best way to celebrate 40 years. One of the most biggest takeaways here is that since this is most of the original members, aside from the bass player who I mentioned, debuted with the band, in like 2012 when they I think first reunited. Again, and of course making his debut on the Out of the Ashes into the Fire album from 2021. They seem to have aged like fine wine here. They are in the best shape they have ever been in and are just firing from all cylinders here. There is just so much power flowing through these songs, besides, of course, the great pristine production and recording and so on that really makes these songs, pop out and stuff. Just really scream. They literally brought new life into these classics, even at times updating a few things to these songs. Take, for example, Axe Victim and Heavy Revolution. Axe Victim is pretty much updated. Not as youthful sounding as it did on The Lord of Flies, but yet somehow more realized. They really honed in on that bluesy side here. Kind of reminded me of a combination of Saxon and early Whitesnake, with the small addition of organs being added to the track here again, but it's especially before breaking into the song, it's kind of used at the beginning there where you really can kind of notice the sort of organ sort of sound there, but it's kind of there though into the song as as it goes on, but it's very subtle. It's kind of put into the background. Same goes for Heavy Revolution, but here it's more of a Hammond organ sound because it's a lot more distorted, but here it is used subtly like the organ is on the re-recording of Axe Victim. Again, it is just put in the background rather than being used up front and being a key dominant part of the song. But what also really strikes at me is that this song, when it was originally recorded, because the band was so young back in 1982 when they first recorded that debut EP, Pray for Metal, the performance was somewhat sloppy to an extent. So the metal riffing, the big, that sort of middle part of the song where normally you would expect it to kind of, break into the guitar solo, even though there kind of really wasn't a guitar solo on the original version of Heavy Revolution. This version does, but again, if you know what I'm referring to, then you know what I'm talking about. Again, if you've ever heard the song to begin with. But the middle riff was just so jagged. Now, since the band is more seasoned and are much more better players, they actually kept the same sort of keys and everything in the riffing, but it sounds more confident here and more well played, which is really unique to me, which is what makes this version all the more exciting. I'm also impressed with the new version of Stand Up. It's a blistering rendition, just so much fire and brimstone in their performance. Speaking of fire and brimstone, how about the lethal version of Death Angel? Holy shit. Talk about blowing away an original. Like I stated, this is one lethal metal machine. Of course, the versions of The Lord of Flies, even with the epic grandiose intro that is the Arrival of the Flies Part 3, again, which is just used to build up to this version, and of course Seven Angels, High Power, Visions of the Past, and Sinner all slay. They pretty much chose the best songs of each release, minus the sort of weak duckling that is Hooked on High Heels, again, what was their last album for like 30 years. With the majority of the material, again, like I've stated, it being taken off of the Lord of Flies album, which turns 40 this year. They took all these songs, whatever, just to make up one great album. And that's another thing. When most bands who have tackled the idea of putting together a collection of re-recorded songs, they mostly just fill out an album with like 13 or 15 tracks, just to fill up a disc or record to being almost an hour long. And for the most part, it just becomes just a filler release in a collection of already good albums to begin with. But the thing is that that's another thing that Axewitch got right as well. They just picked what was good, and they kept it at that. They kept it at least 9 tracks minimal. Mostly, I guess, reminding some people what some of the best heavy metal bands did back in the days. Like, for example, like Judas Priest. They kept at least 9 songs minimal for like a British Steel, or even to an extent for like Scream for Vengeance. So they kept at least a minimal of just 9 great songs, 39 minutes, and that's about it. And they made the best of it, and made it to where I wanted to hear more. And that's how you do it. So there it is. There's my thoughts on The Last of a Dying Breed, 40 Years in Metal from Axewitch. I'm giving it a solid 10 out of 10, folks. This was a really good release, and normally, probably are never really supposed to give a collection of re-recording such a high rating because of, for the most part, that's what the releases are, it's just a bunch of re-recordings. But Axewitch did such a great job and knew how to do this, and just they attacked this from a very unique perspective that in a way shouldn't be considered unique. But since most bands have mostly screwed it up so much and mostly focus on just being nostalgia pieces, whenever those nostalgia hit pieces, that somehow Axewitch did it in a way that it is unique. And it is in a very fantastic way. So they somehow just knew how to do it better. Just like Oz kind of did it. So that's why I'm giving it such a high rating, and it is worth the 10 out of 10 for me. It is worth it. They handled this in the best care as possible, and that's how you do it. And given that it's most of the original members, it just makes it even more special. So there it is. Thank you to, of course, Bjorn Heinborg for sending this to me and having me listening to this and reviewing this. This is almost a contender for even Album of the Year for me. This is just that good. I'm really, really satisfied with this album, and thank you. Thank you very much. So if you want to at least pick up yourself a copy of this, or possibly even, let's say, even a copy of The Lord of Flies, their debut full-length album, I'm going to leave you to a link to the Bandcamp page where you can find this and this copy as well, or even the reissue that Hooked on Metal Records released as well. And of course, their second album, Visions of the Past, it'll be on their Bandcamp page where you can purchase all of this. So please go out of your way and support Axewitch. Support the old guard of Swedish heavy metal. There you go, folks. Hope all of you enjoy. And of course, if you actually have ever had any chance to listen to this, you know what to do, folks. You can leave your thoughts in the comment section below. So there you go. This is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.